My name is Miranda, and I am 22 years old. When I was 10, my whole world collapsed in a single year. I lost both my parents, and everything familiar disappeared with them. The only person who stepped forward to hold my broken life together was my grandmother. She took me into her small home, gave me food, clothes, and a place to sleep, but more than that, she gave me the love I had lost. She became my anchor, my protector, and the only family I had left. As I grew older, I became like any young girl my age. I loved going out with friends. I loved music, laughter, and parties. Sometimes I didn't listen to my grandmother's warnings. She seemed too strict, too serious, too old to understand my world. But even in my stubborn moments, I respected her deeply, because I knew she had carried me through the darkest years of my life. She always worried about my future. She wanted me to be safe, settled, and loved by someone who would treat me the way she did. That is why she arranged my marriage to Simon, a gentle carpenter from our village. I agreed, believing he could give me the stability I needed. For 2 years, our life was quiet and simple, yet full of warmth. At that time, I thought I had found my safe place in the world. When Simon received a job offer in New York, it felt like our lives were opening into something bigger. The salary was better, and the city promised opportunities we never had in our small village. We were both excited, almost nervous with hope. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter, a brighter one. We moved into a tiny apartment, nothing special, but to us it felt like a dream. Simon left early every morning, lunchbox in hand, and came home tired but smiling. I stayed in the apartment, cleaned, cooked dinner, and waited for him. Our evenings were simple, eating together, watching TV, talking about our plans. There was a sweetness in that routine, a warm sense of belonging. But the city slowly changed me. I began meeting people who lived in a world far more glamorous than mine. They wore designer clothes, attended extravagant parties, and moved with a confidence I had never known. When they invited me along, I felt small and plain beside them. I wanted to shine the way they did. So I asked Simon for a beautiful dress, something that would help me fit in. It cost $1,800, money he had been saving for years to open his own shop. But he didn't hesitate. He spent it all on me. His love was steady, but my desire for more had already begun. As time went on, the parties became my new world. I went out almost every night, laughing, drinking, dancing, feeling alive in a way I thought I never had before. I didn't notice how often Simon waited for me, sitting alone at home after another exhausting double shift. He worked harder so he could buy the clothes and jewelry I wanted, while I drifted farther away from him, dreaming of a life filled with luxury and excitement. The distance between us grew like a silent wall. Simon still looked at me with love, but I barely saw him anymore. I was too busy imagining the life I thought I deserved. And then I met Pete. He walked into the club wearing an expensive suit, his watch shining under the lights. He smiled at me, and the room suddenly felt warmer. Pete took me to restaurants I had only seen on TV. He drove a beautiful car. He slipped money into my hand as if it were nothing. And each time I compared him to Simon, I felt ashamed of my simple life, ashamed of the man who had loved me more than anyone ever had. Soon I convinced myself that Simon wasn't enough for me. One afternoon, while Simon was still at work, I packed my fancy clothes and jewelry into bags. I sat at the small kitchen table and wrote him a letter. My hands trembled as I admitted what I felt, that I no longer wanted our quiet life, that he couldn't give me the world I dreamed of. Then I walked out, leaving behind the only real love I had ever known. My grandmother called the same week. Her voice shook with disappointment as she told me, Miranda, con se kong bao geo tim duok nuoi yu con nu Simon. I didn't listen. I thought she didn't understand the life I wanted. With Pete, everything seemed perfect, for a while. A whole year passed in a blur of parties, gifts, and laughter. But then my body began to betray me. First small pains, then a crushing heaviness in my chest. Eventually the doctor said the words I never imagined hearing: breast cancer, advanced and spreading fast. Lying in that cold hospital bed, I felt like every mistake I had ever made was crashing down on me. The white walls, the humming machines, the quiet footsteps of the nurses, they all reminded me that I was alone. Truly alone. Pete was gone. The parties were gone. The diamonds were meaningless. And for the first time in my life, I wished I had never left the small, warm home Simon and I once shared. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and called my grandmother. My voice broke as I confessed everything: the lies, the betrayal, the selfish choices, the reality of Pete. I expected her to yell, to scold me, to tell me I deserved this. But she simply said, "Stay there. I'm coming." A few hours later, the hospital door opened. My grandmother walked in, and beside her was Simon. My breath caught in my throat. Shame washed over me so hard it hurt. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't bear the thought of him seeing what I had become. But Simon walked to my bed quietly and sat down. He didn't say anything harsh. He didn't ask why I left. He just took my hand, gently, like I was something fragile. I broke down. "Why are you here?" I whispered through the tears. "I hurt you. I left you for someone else. I don't deserve you." Simon's eyes softened, and he shook his head. "Miranda," he said, "you may have left me, but I never stopped loving you." Slowly, day by day, my body began to heal, almost as if it finally understood that this time, I wanted to live. After nearly a year in hospitals, needles, and tears, the doctor told me I could go home. I looked at Simon and my grandmother standing beside me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something warm in my chest: hope. We left the city behind. The noise, the lights, the parties, the lies, all of it stayed there. We moved back to the village, into my grandmother's house, where everything smelled like childhood and second chances. Life became simple again, and for the first time, I welcomed that simplicity. Every morning I cooked breakfast. Every evening I waited for Simon to come home from work, tired but smiling. I learned to enjoy the rhythm of a quiet home, the sound of vegetables frying, the breeze. Now, looking back at everything I lived through, the mistakes, the tears, the foolish dreams, the heartbreak, I finally understand what love truly is. It is not loud. It is not dazzling. It is not made of diamonds, parties, or fancy clothes. True love is quiet but powerful. It is the hand that stays when everyone else walks away. It is the person who sits beside your hospital bed when you are too weak to lift your head. I used to think money could make me happy. I used to believe that a glamorous life meant a better life. But now I know, money impresses, but love heals. Sometimes we don't understand the value of someone until we lose them, or almost lose ourselves. I learned this the hard way. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for learning English through stories with me, and I hope to see you in the next video.